"Get out. Call security. Escort this woman out immediately." Branch manager Sandra Wilson's voice rang out like a blade through the already tense air of Liberty Financial's largest branch. In the middle of the lobby, Alicia Carter, a black woman in her 40s dressed in simple attire, stood calmly at the teller's window. The $75,000 withdrawal slip lay quietly between her and Sandra, an invisible line drawn between entitlement and prejudice. Two security guards strode forward, hands hovering at their belts. The entire bank fell silent. Every eye was fixed on Alicia. She addressed them with composed clarity, not a hint of fear in her tone. "I'm simply here to withdraw my own money. I've presented all the proper identification, and I haven't raised my voice or caused a disturbance." But Sandra did not back down. Her voice shattered the hush once more. "We don't hand cash over to fraudsters or people like you. You're making a scene. Take her out now." A guard reached out, his grip firm on Alicia's arm as he prepared to physically remove her. In that instant, Alicia slid her hand into her blazer pocket, a small, deliberate movement that marked the beginning of a stunning reversal, one that would alter not just her own fate, but the destiny of this entire bank. What follows is a tale of poetic justice more satisfying than anything you've seen. The very employees who so confidently expelled this customer had no idea that the woman they insulted was the one with the power to decide all of their fates. Monday morning in Atlanta was still stirring awake, but the downtown Liberty Financial branch was already alive with activity. The sun glinted off the polished glass exterior as customers streamed in, hurried, anxious, eager, or annoyed. Uniformed tellers in sky-blue shirts moved briskly between stations, the reception desk, and the waiting area. The click of high heels, the whir of printers, and the murmur of names being called blended into the familiar soundtrack of the financial world. In a secluded corner behind a row of plastic chairs, a black woman in her 40s entered quietly. Petite, with rich brown skin and her hair braided into a tight bun, her face was bare of makeup, but her eyes shone with purpose. She wore an unassuming outfit, well-worn sneakers with frayed stitching, and carried a faded canvas tote slung over one shoulder. A baseball cap shielded her face, helping her blend seamlessly into the crowd. No one in the bank, not the guards, the receptionists, nor the customers glued to their phones, suspected she was anything but an ordinary client. No one knew that just months before her name had dominated the business headlines. Alicia Carter, Liberty Financial's first black female CEO, the executive credited with rescuing two failing branches and recently appointed to lead the entire system. But this morning, Alicia came not as a powerful director, but as the humblest of patrons. No luxury car, no jewelry, no assistant in tow, and certainly no laptop or files. She chose the simplest disguise and took a seat at the very end of the bench as any other waiting customer would. While she appeared to check messages on her phone, she was in fact taking note of everything. The receptionist's greetings, the covert glances and furrowed brows reserved for plainly dressed patrons, the guards' shifts of stance, even the rise and fall of staff voices calling the next customer. Every subtle cue was etched into her memory. Beyond withdrawing her funds, Alicia harbored a deeper mission: to witness firsthand the injustices and discriminatory behavior that had prompted numerous complaints to the board of directors. For her, truth is forged in the details, and sometimes, only by playing the powerless role can one truly grasp what justice and integrity demand at the threshold of a bank. The lobby buzzed on, but in that quiet corner sat a modest woman, poised to unleash a reckoning that would reshape the destiny of this entire banking institution. As soon as Alicia settled at the end of the row of chairs, the bank's rhythm seemed unchanged, but her eyes were already cataloging the unspoken rules beneath the polite surface, where every glance, every smile, and every passing look carried layers of meaning that words could never capture. In less than 10 minutes, she'd witnessed a small drama of power and silent discrimination playing out among different groups. It began when Robert Miller, a tall white businessman with salt and pepper hair, a sharp gray suit, and a gleaming Rolex, pushed open the door. Without taking a ticket or joining the line, he was instantly recognized by Linda Brown, the blonde receptionist. Linda sprang to her feet, offering a warm smile and a gentle tone that stood in stark contrast to the curt manner she'd shown ordinary customers moments before. "Welcome, Mr. Miller. Let me show you to our VIP lounge. Would you like coffee or bottled water today?" Alicia didn't take her eyes off that exchange. A single look, a single smile, a gracious greeting. Just enough to elevate one person to VIP status while relegating everyone else to just a number. Moments later, an elderly Asian couple entered quietly. The wife clung to her husband's arm, eyes weary, steps tentative. Linda glanced at them for exactly 1 second, pointed toward the farthest seating area, and said tersely, "Take a ticket over there and wait until your number's called." No smile, no polite questions, no offer of assistance. Alicia caught the old woman's puzzled look as the couple sat down at the back, swallowed by the shadows, an image that could not have contrasted more sharply with the warmth offered to Robert Miller. Then Sophie Parker, a young white woman with golden curls in a blue and white plaid dress, strode in, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Linda's face lit up instantly. "Hi, Sophie. Where did you go for that picnic this weekend? You look radiant." "Just here to withdraw some cash," Sophie replied lightly. Linda laughed, waving her hand. "Don't mind me. I'll be quick. Can't keep a pretty girl waiting." 2 minutes later, Sophie was done, wished a wonderful day, and left without a single hiccup. Alicia noted every shift in tone, every lingering gaze, every act of unmasked favoritism toward customers deemed ideal. Sometimes prejudice didn't need harsh words or ugly actions. It thrived in cold indifference, in being invisible, in the tiny gestures and appraising looks that made a person feel utterly inconsequential, like an extra feature in a luxury showroom. The more she watched, the clearer the cycle of injustice became. Clients like Robert Miller or Sophie Parker received unquestioned priority, whether by design or by default. Foreigners, people of color, or anyone dressed plainly, like Alicia herself, were shunted to the margins, both literally and figuratively. In those moments, Alicia's plan crystallized. Every crease on Linda's face when she addressed the elderly couple, every withheld smile for those deemed unworthy, every quick side-eye at Alicia's faded canvas tote. Each was living proof of a silent code ruling this place. Quietly, Alicia recorded it all. To everyone else, she was just another customer. But in her mind, the pieces of truth were falling into place, readying her for the next move, when she would not only withdraw her money, but expose the unfair system that had thrived here for far too long. Every passing moment made Alicia feel the full weight of those unspoken rules etched into every chair and teller window. If the blatant favoritism shown to people like Robert Miller or Sophie Parker was a cold, sharp knife, the way Alicia was being ignored felt like a slow, burning, suffocating blade. She glanced at her watch. Nearly 40 minutes had gone by since she'd walked in. 2 waves of customers had come and gone, yet she, a quietly seated woman with a faded canvas tote and simple jeans, hadn't been acknowledged once. Strangely, the moment any white customer arrived, even those who came in after her, staff recognized them or automatically gave them priority. David Clark, a salt and pepper-haired man in a white shirt, barely stepped out of his car. Before Emily Turner, a teller, smiled and rushed to open the door, personally escorting him to window 2 without making him take a number. A young, red-headed woman in athletic wear breezed through her savings deposit in under 3 minutes, and even received a thank-you gift voucher for loyal customers. An elderly white woman with silver hair showed up about 10 minutes after Alicia. The moment she entered, someone guided her to a private counter, whispering, "I'll help you first today." By contrast, whenever Alicia looked toward the reception desk, Linda only let her eyes skim over Alicia as if she were invisible. Alicia considered getting up to ask a question, but as soon as she neared the desk, Linda snatched up her phone and turned away, feigning busyness. Alicia even caught a snippet of whispered conversation between Linda and Emily. "Has that girl been waiting long?" "Don't know. Seems like a new customer. Let's serve regulars first." Every glance they cast her way was laced with suspicion, as if serving her would somehow invite trouble, or perhaps no one wanted to waste courtesy on a black woman dressed too plainly. The pattern became even clearer when a Hispanic man in a grimy work uniform joined the line ahead of Alicia. When his turn came, he carefully pulled out his ID and handed it to Greg Harris, the notoriously strict head teller. Greg's scrutiny was obvious. "What do you do for a living? Why are you withdrawing this amount? Do you have an employment contract? What's your work address?" He was forced to sign 2 extra verification forms and was repeatedly grilled about the source of his modest sum. For nearly 10 minutes, dozens of eyes in the lobby covertly followed him, as though he were a criminal in custody rather than a legitimate customer. Alicia recorded every detail, her heart rising with both anger and sorrow, not just for herself, but for all those who have been and will be relegated to this invisible line simply because of their skin color, their background, or their plain appearance. In that moment, she realized more clearly than ever. The greatest injustice isn't always open insults, but the quiet erasure and the subtle, painful exclusion that can reduce a person, no matter how legitimate their documents or claim, to a mere shadow within the very system they uphold. And in that drawn-out silence, every line on the employees' faces, every small gesture as they turned away, only steeled Alicia's resolve. Today, she wasn't just here to watch, she was here to change things. But before she acted, she would keep observing, ensuring that not a single attitude, action, or word could escape being brought to light. The lobby stayed deathly quiet, time stretching out like an inescapable strand of tension. When the Hispanic man left with a heavy look, Alicia realized only she and 2 others remained on the list, but Linda still deliberately avoided meeting her gaze. Finally, unable to ignore her any longer, Linda gave a reluctant nod and called out, "Number 47, please go to window 4. Alicia inhaled deeply and rose to her feet, appearing calm on the outside even as her heart pounded fiercely inside. All eyes instinctively brushed past her. A black woman in a plain tee and worn jeans, with no visible sign of status or power. Only the quiet confidence in her gaze hinted that she could not be completely dismissed. Window 4 was manned by Amy Sanders. Amy was a white woman in her 30s, with her blonde hair pulled back into a tight bun, a slender build, and a face made up so quickly it looked almost washed out. As Alicia approached, Amy lifted her eyes, and her expression flickered coolly for a moment. She scanned Alicia from head to toe, taking in the t-shirt and frayed tote, then lowered her voice to a near whisper. "What do you need?" Amy's polite but clipped smile carried a hint of wariness and the arrogance of someone accustomed to judging customers by their appearance. Alicia said nothing, her features as still as a placid lake. She placed 3 items on the counter, her ID, her bank card, and the completed withdrawal slip, Her voice was soft but firm and unmistakably clear. "I'd like to withdraw $75,000 from my personal account. Here's my ID, my bank card, and the withdrawal form." Amy blinked, her eyebrows knitting together at the mention of $75,000. She glanced at the documents, paused over the name Alicia Carter, then looked up at Alicia's face as if she needed one more confirmation. Suspicion glinted in her eyes, thinly veiled by a mechanical nod. Rather than process the transaction as she would for Sophie or other VIPs, Amy hesitated and subtly motioned toward Greg Harris, the head teller at the next window, who had just finished a transaction. Amy's look seemed to send the message, "New customer. Large sum. Be careful." Greg caught her signal and stepped over, leaning in to scrutinize Alicia more closely. His gaze betrayed a mix of jaded coldness and the rigid authority of someone who believes he alone can decide who qualifies as a good customer. "Is there a problem, Amy?" Greg asked, his voice just loud enough for nearby patrons to hear. Amy replied in a low tone, each word like a pinprick in the air. "The customer wants to withdraw a substantial amount. I'm just verifying the details." Alicia remained composed, betraying no hint of anxiety, even as she felt the mounting doubt behind the glass partition. Every move Amy made became painstakingly thorough. Turning the bank card this way and that, double-checking the ID number, even booting up the computer to review transaction history. Steps no elite customer before her had ever faced. Outside the windows, Linda kept glancing toward window 4, her eyes a blend of curiosity and complicity, while Greg and Amy maintained their guarded stance, as if waiting for the slightest excuse to sound an alarm. In that moment, Alicia understood more clearly than ever. Her first challenge wasn't the paperwork or the amount. It was breaking through the barrier of ingrained biases this system had built over time. And she was determined not to back down. The air around window 4 turned suddenly cold, as if every overhead light in the bank had focused on the spot where Alicia stood. The attention she received now was nothing like the indifferent glances of a forgotten customer in the lobby. Instead, it was scrutiny, suspicion, and the icy vigilance of a system long used to sorting people into customer classes. Greg Harris stepped forward, positioning himself right behind Amy so that his shadow loomed over the counter like a threat. No longer speaking in a helpful tone, he raised his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "That's quite a large amount. Has this account had any unusual activity lately, Amy?" He deliberately emphasized unusual, seeding doubt in everyone's mind and implicitly questioning the validity of Alicia's request. Amy, still holding Alicia's ID and bank card, began to tremble. She fumbled at her mouse, eyes glued to her screen, avoiding Alicia's gaze. Her lookups and checks dragged on at an unnaturally slow pace, a stark contrast to her brisk efficiency with the white customers before. The tension thickened further when Jason Baker, a young, brown-haired teller, slid his chair over and leaned in to whisper to Greg, loud enough for Alicia to catch, "She doesn't look like the kind of person with an account that big. You might want to double-check." His words, sharp as a blade, cut into Alicia's pride and echoed through the bank. Other customers began whispering, throwing curious, skeptical glances her way. Greg acknowledged that whisper with a slow nod, then turned back to Alicia with open judgment in his eyes. "What do you do for a living, ma'am? What's the purpose of this withdrawal? Should we get additional approval from management?" Alicia kept her voice calm and steady, looking him straight in the eye. "I've been a customer here for years. You can verify my transaction history. This is my personal money and I'm entitled to withdraw it. If you need further verification, I'm happy to cooperate, but I do expect you to respect my privacy and my rights as a client. Amy swallowed hard, still shaking as she entered each detail into the system. She glanced at Greg with pleading eyes, clearly wishing she could be relieved of this irregular case. Jason leaned back against the wall with arms crossed, lips pressed together in a stifled smile. To him, this was just a little performance. A test to see how a plainly dressed black woman dared to step into the realm of high-tier customers. Throughout the transaction hall, the atmosphere grew increasingly stifling. An elderly man whispered to his friend, "Where on earth do you get that much money?" All the doubt, the guarded stares, the toxic whispers, even though they were small and petty, formed an invisible wall that, day after day, hour after hour, pushed people like Alicia out of the fair treatment this bank should offer everyone. And Alicia quietly absorbed every look and every attitude into her memory, knowing this was only the first step in a much larger challenge ahead. The invisible chill around window 4 thickened into tangible pressure, as though every light in the bank had homed in on Alicia's spot. Hundreds of suspicious, uneasy, and even satisfied gazes tightened around her, the way someone different gets scrutinized. Yet Alicia remained composed, shoulders back, eyes locked on Greg. Her voice was soft, but every word rang with resolve. "I've been a long-time customer, and my account is fully verified. If necessary, you can contact the oversight department or senior management directly." Greg's brow furrowed, but his gaze stayed fixed on Alicia's bank card. He tapped his phone to call someone, cupping his mouth as if to hide the conversation, while still making sure everyone nearby knew something serious was underway. Meanwhile, Amy grew more flustered. Instead of simply processing the transaction, she moved into interrogation mode. "What exactly is this money for, Miss Carter? Have you received any unusual income recently? Do you have documentation proving the source of these funds?" Her questions were a malicious checklist. Things Robert Miller or Sophie Parker would never have to answer, but that were suddenly mandatory for Alicia. A strange atmosphere swept through the banking hall. Customers who'd been waiting turned their heads, eyes wide, trying to figure out who this woman in the navy tee was and why the entire branch was on high alert. A discreet young woman in the corner lifted her phone, quietly recording the scene. At the far end, an elderly man leaned in to whisper to his companion, eyes narrowed with implication. Greg muttered into his phone, glancing occasionally at Alicia. The air grew denser, every word and look laden with blatant doubt and near hostility. This wasn't just a transaction anymore. It was an act of a community guarding its invisible borders against someone deemed unworthy. Under immense pressure, Alicia stood her ground. Calmly, she answered each question, restating her account details and transaction history, emphasizing, "If you have concerns about the funds, check your system. I've completed every required procedure, and I am under no obligation to explain my personal withdrawal unless there's a legal mandate." Amy hesitated, but her chill caution prevailed. She continued grilling Alicia over trivial details, clearly trying to buy time and win Greg's approval. Greg, phone now off, nodded at Amy as if to say, "Keep going, follow protocol." Behind them, Jason Baker leaned against the wall with arms crossed, wearing a smug grin as he watched this public lesson for an out-of-place woman. All the subtle background noises, the printer's hum, the keyboard clicks, the faint drone of the AC were now drowned by the tense silence around window 4. Every stare at Alicia, every secret recording, every whispered comment had turned a simple withdrawal into a makeshift courtroom where no justice could be found. And in the heart of that silent storm, Alicia, through her patience, composure, and quiet pride, remained unshaken. But deep in her eyes a spark of determination had ignited. She knew, if she stayed silent today, Everyone who'd suffered injustice here would remain invisible shadows forever. The air around the teller window grew increasingly tense, like a guitar string stretched to its breaking point. Less than 3 minutes after Greg's phone call, the entrance of Sandra Wilson, the branch manager of Liberty Financial, made every gaze in the lobby feel heavy, almost suffocating. Sandra strode forward in glossy black heels, her tailored pencil skirt hugging her tall frame, and her brown hair pulled back into a perfectly neat low bun. Her face was a studied mask, red lipstick, sharp eyes, every feature radiating authority, and an icy unapproachability. She didn't spare Alicia more than a single glance, offering no polite smile or greeting. She skimmed the documents on the counter, then looked up with narrowed eyes, a mixture of suspicion, control, and barely concealed contempt. Sandra didn't bother introducing herself or stating her title. She stepped closer, her voice ringing out like hammer blows. An amount this large is far too much for someone like you. Liberty Financial serves specific client segments, and you do not belong to one of them. Each word laid bare her deep prejudice, as if Alicia's very presence here were an unacceptable absurdity. The air seemed to freeze. Greg and Jason, who had been whispering just moments before, now openly sneered, their faces unmasked in gleeful disdain as they watched the outsider get shut down. Only Amy Sanders, whose conscience still tugged at her, looked away in embarrassment, fingers twisting together, eyes fixed on her screen to avoid meeting anyone's gaze. Amy knew this was unjust, but her silence in that moment was a sad form of complicity. Alicia remained unmoved, shoulders squared, eyes locked on Sandra. Every pair of eyes, from the staff behind the counter to the curious onlookers to the manager wielding her power, was fixed on her. And yet Alicia's composure never cracked. She answered simply, her tone calm but resolute. "I'm here to withdraw my own money." But in that charged moment, the statement rang out as a direct challenge to the unfair system surrounding her. Nearby, customers began to murmur. The lobby's atmosphere shifted to one of anticipation, tension, and a touch of fearful curiosity, as if they were witnessing a drama with an uncertain outcome. Sandra's icy expression held firm, but in her eyes flickered something else, the smug satisfaction of someone in power mixed with irritation at being challenged by someone she deemed unworthy. And there it stood, the pinnacle of prejudice, power stripped of any veneer of neutrality, revealing itself as outright exclusion, a silent gate that had slammed shut on countless people for years, simply because they didn't fit the segment others felt entitled to define. The heavy words still hang in the air, cold and loaded with implication, like an indictment that needs no evidence. But Sandra doesn't stop there. The discrimination sheds its professionalism facade and morphs into a personal assault, each question sharp with suspicion and contempt. Arms crossed, Sandra leans toward Alicia, her gaze sweeping head to toe as if confronting a con artist rather than a legitimate customer. An amount this large. Did you just receive a settlement, win the lottery, or inherit something? Or is there something you're not telling us? Her insinuations ring out loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, instantly casting Alicia as the subject of public scrutiny, not as a client but as someone on trial. Some patrons whisper, others scowl, and a few pull out their phones to record, faces a mix of amusement and curiosity. Greg and Jason exchange triumphant smirks, as though they've finally confirmed their worst suspicions about someone they never trusted. Yet Alicia remains perfectly calm. She meets Sandra's eyes and responds with clear, unwavering confidence. "I'm under no obligation to explain my own withdrawal. If the bank needs verification, please review my account history or contact senior management. Her composure only fuels Sandra's fury. Sandra's mask of authority cracks, her dark red lips tightening into a cold line before she issues a curt command, stripping away any pretense of courtesy. "Security, escort this woman out. We don't serve fraudsters or people like her." The room freezes. Everything that once felt like customer service vanishes, replaced by raw, brute power. The power to deny someone their lawful rights based solely on background, skin color, appearance, and the audacity to demand fairness. Two guards, Mike Turner and Eric Holmes, step forward immediately, tall figures betraying a flicker of discomfort even as they obey. Mike places a hand on Alicia's arm. Eric positions himself to block her path if she resists. In that moment, all eyes fix on Alicia. Some filled with pity, some with regret, but most with cold satisfaction or even glee at this public punishment many believe is deserved. Greg whispers to Jason, a self-satisfied grin creeping across his face. Amy Sanders, her conscience still aching, cannot bring herself to speak. She simply turns away, shoulders trembling. Alicia feels both the sting of humiliation and the crushing weight of prejudice bearing down on her. Yet in her eyes there is no sign of defeat. Instead, a quiet pride and steely resolve begin to blaze, because more than anyone, Alicia knows, when endurance is pushed to its limit, it ignites the fiercest fire. And this moment for her is only the beginning of an unstoppable reversal of power. The moment Sandra Wilson's cruel command fell, the entire bank seemed to freeze in place for a heartbeat. Though Mike Turner and Eric Holmes hesitated, they obeyed. Mike stepped forward, his hand firm, yet measured on Alicia's arm. Eric, towering beside him, took a half step in front of her, blocking the exit, eyes scanning the room as if bracing for a fight. The scene, an unassuming black woman in plain clothes surrounded by sharp suits and uniforms, had become a living portrait of injustice and the cold cruelty of power. Yet, what stunned everyone wasn't a desperate struggle from Alicia, but the remarkable calm she maintained. Gently, Alicia removed Mike's hand from her arm. Her gaze was steady, her voice clear and unhurried, with no hint of pleading or anger. "I'm not causing a disturbance, I'm simply withdrawing my own money. All my documents have already been verified." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a shift from idle curiosity to a quiet outrage building among the customers. A middle-aged woman behind her, face flushed with anger, spoke up. "What is this about? She's only asking for her own money." A young man in a blue shirt silently pulled out his phone, began recording the guards, forcing Alicia away. Within seconds, 2 or 3 more customers did the same, murmuring about the blatant injustice. In the back, an older gentleman rose to his feet, glaring at window 4 in open indignation. Someone at the reception desk called out, "What kind of rule is this? Whose bank is this? Who gave you the right to humiliate a customer in public?" But behind the counter, Sandra remained impassive, arms crossed, face as cold as ice. Greg and Jason exchanged smug grins as though watching a private comedy. Amy Sanders sat rigidly, eyes brimming with tears, torn between her conscience and her fear of losing her job. Eric spoke up, his tone mechanical as he restated Sandra's order. "Ma'am, we must ask you to leave. If you refuse, we will be forced to take stronger measures." Those words echoed through the lobby, thickening the air with tension. But Alicia did not waver. She lifted her chin, meeting the guards and the recording phones around her with a calm, unwavering voice. "I've done nothing wrong. All I'm demanding is fair service. Forcing me out isn't just insulting. It violates this bank's own customer service policies." silence cracked like ice. Faces from the back of the lobby to the main entrance, where a gleaming sign still proclaimed, "Dedicated service, equal treatment for all," registered shock, empathy, and growing indignation. In that charged stillness, a silent rebellion began to spread. Phones continued rolling, eyes softened with solidarity and rising anger. And at the center of it all stood Alicia, the woman in the faded jeans and navy tee, unyielding, fearless, ready to face whatever came next. She didn't yet know that in just a few minutes the tables would turn completely. But in this moment, her quiet dignity and pride had ignited a spark of courage in all those who had ever felt like invisible shadows in an unjust world. The bank lobby remained oppressively silent after the forced removal. Phones still recording were trained on Alicia, and sympathetic, outraged gazes tracked her every move. Amid that tension, Alicia calmly pulled an old phone from her canvas tote and dialed slowly, her eyes showing not a flicker of fear. Her fingers moved over the screen with practiced ease, as if she'd made this call countless times in critical moments of her life. The line rang once before a clear male voice came through. "Michael Reynolds speaking." Alicia spoke deliberately, each word crisp, her voice neither shaking nor angry but radiating a chilling resolve. "Hi, Michael. This is Alicia Carter. I'm currently being denied a lawful transaction and forcibly removed from the downtown branch. Please intervene immediately. I'm keeping you on the line so you can hear everything." The room froze for an instant. Sandra Wilson looked at Alicia, the corner of her mouth curling into a haughty sneer. "You're wasting your time calling someone, ma'am. If you don't hang up and leave the bank, we'll call the police right away." Sandra's tone dripped with smug satisfaction, as though savoring her last moments of absolute power. Greg and Jason, standing behind her, began whispering to each other, their expressions shifting from confidence to uncertainty as they sensed something was amiss. Amy Sanders, still trembling, suddenly looked up at Alicia, her panic giving way to genuine concern. The other tellers exchanged anxious glances and hushed comments. But Alicia wasn't fazed by the threats. Turning her back on Sandra, she addressed the guards and waiting customers, her voice calm as she continued, "Michael, the guards have their hands on me. Branch manager Sandra Wilson has ordered me removed from the counter even though I'm causing no disturbance. Several customers are recording this. I'm putting it on speaker so everything is on record." It was that astonishing composure in the eye of the storm that began to shift the atmosphere. Mike Turner and Eric Holmes, the same guards who had been so resolute, now hesitated. The pressure on Alicia's arm eased, confusion flickering across their faces. For the first time, they seemed to realize they might be exceeding their authority. Sandra didn't relent, but a sliver of doubt appeared in her eyes. She shot a look to Amy and Greg, silently ordering, "Stay the course." Yet Greg's lips suddenly felt parched, and Jason's mocking grin faded into uneasy worry. Outside the counter area, the customers filming the incident fell silent, awaiting the next development. Amy Sanders bowed her head, her hands shaking on the countertop, eyes shining with fear and remorse. Deep down, she knew the line between right and wrong had never felt so fragile. Alicia's confidence and resolve spread like an invisible wave, gradually transforming the lobby battlefield that had seemed impregnable. For the first time, a significant crack appeared in the armor of Sandra Wilson's authority. Everyone sensed it. Change was coming. It was only a matter of time, and of discovering who exactly this mysterious Michael Reynolds was within the Liberty Financial family. The calm voice of Alicia over the speakerphone rang out through the tense lobby, becoming the turning point that set events in motion, not only at the downtown branch but all the way up at Liberty Financial's headquarters, where real power resides. Across town, on the top floor of Liberty Tower, Michael Reynolds, Chief Operating Officer, had just ended his call with Alicia. His expression turned immediately grave. He needed no further explanation. His experience and leadership instincts told him that every odd detail in Alicia's report signaled a brewing storm. Without hesitation, Michael issued a crisp order to his assistant. Immediately, pull up the security feeds for the entire downtown branch. Instruct all staff to remain at their posts. No one is to leave the trading floor. Have legal on the 16th floor report up here now, and alert the chairman of the board at once. The office floor erupted. Internal alerts flooded every department's screens. Michael's assistant routed the live surveillance feed straight into the boardroom. Within minutes, the large monitor in Meeting Room 2 displayed a clear image of the downtown branch lobby, where Alicia stood surrounded by guards, managers, and staff. At the other end, Chairman Jonathan Evans, a silver-haired man known for his stern fairness, entered, flanked by senior board members. Lisa Howard, Vice President of Human Resources, Frank Peterson, General Counsel, Megan Torres, Head of Strategic Client Oversight, and several senior attorneys. They all fell silent as they took in the image. A black woman in a navy t-shirt, dark jeans, and a faded canvas tote, utterly out of place among the bank's crisp uniforms, being forcibly restrained in the luxurious lobby of the institution that bore her own name. Lisa Howard gripped her briefing folder, anger flashing in her eyes as she heard Sandra Wilson's harsh assertions. "We don't serve fraudsters or people like her. If she doesn't leave, we will call the police." Frank Peterson, usually the most impassive member, sighed heavily, tapping his pen on the table, already anticipating the severe fallout that would soon ripple through the organization. "That is CEO Carter, right?" Megan Torres blurted, eyes widening as she recognized the familiar face in plain clothes. Jonathan Evans said nothing, folding his arms and fixing his gaze on the images of Sandra, Greg, Jason, and the security team. Then he spoke quietly to legal. "Preserve every second of this footage. Mark every word and action by the downtown branch staff. And get communications on standby. If this leaks, we cannot allow the narrative to slip out of our control." The tension in the boardroom matched that of the branch lobby. Those accustomed to seeing their powerful CEO in command now sat in stunned silence, embarrassed and outraged to see her treated like a powerless stranger in her own home. On the screen, Alicia's calm voice continued over the speakerphone. Michael Reynolds stood by the window, phone in hand, leaning toward the Chairman Evans. "I'm going down there in person. No one is to leave their post until I arrive." Jonathan Evans nodded, his face composed, but his eyes burnt with a barely contained fury. Fury not just at the mistreatment of one individual, but at the betrayal of a core value of the entire institution. Every eye at headquarters was glued to that screen, waiting, seething, ready for the shockwave to come, one where, this time, the truth would no longer be hidden behind any facade. The entire lobby froze in that heavy silence after the forced removal. Phones, still recording, were pointed at Alicia, and sympathetic, outraged eyes followed her every move. Amid that tension, Alicia calmly pulled an old cell phone from her tote, dialed a number, her gaze unwavering. Her fingers moved over the keypad with practiced ease, as if she'd made this call countless times in critical moments. A single ring, then a clear male voice answered, "Michael Reynolds speaking." Alicia spoke deliberately, each word measured and resolute. "Michael, this is Alicia Carter. I'm being illegally denied a lawful withdrawal and forced out of the downtown branch. Please intervene immediately. I'm putting you on speaker so you can hear everything." The room stilled. Sandra Wilson's lips curled into a contemptuous sneer as she replied loudly enough for all to hear. "You're wasting your time calling someone, ma'am. If you don't hang up and leave now, we'll call the police." Her tone dripped with smug satisfaction, as though savoring her last moments of power. Greg and Jason glanced at one another, overconfidence giving way to unease. Amy Sanders, trembling, finally looked up at Alicia, fear and guilt etched on her face. The other tellers exchanged anxious whispers, but Alicia paid their threats no mind. Turning her back on Sandra, she addressed the guards and onlookers. "Michael, the guards have their hands on me. Branch Manager Sandra Wilson just ordered my removal despite no disturbance. Several customers are recording this. I'm putting it on speaker so everything's on record." At that moment, everything shifted. Mike Turner and Eric Holmes, the same guards who'd held her firm, hesitated, then loosened their grip, uncertainty flickering across their faces. For the first time, they seemed to realize they might be overstepping their authority. Sandra refused to back down, but doubt crept into her eyes. She glanced at Amy and Greg, silently urging them to stand firm. Yet Greg's lips went parched, and Jason's mocking grin faded into anxious worry. Across the lobby, the customers filming had gone silent, watching for what would happen next. Amy Sanders bowed her head, tears streaming, hands shaking on the counter, tormented between conscience and fear. Alicia's calm resolve spread like an electric charge, transforming the once impenetrable lobby into a battlefield of truth. For the first time, a crack appeared in Sandra Wilson's armor of authority. Everyone felt it. Change was coming. Now it was only a matter of time, and of discovering who this mysterious Michael Reynolds really was within the Liberty financial empire. The entire bank lobby held its breath after Michael Reynolds' cold question. No one dared to speak. Every eye was fixed on Sandra Wilson, just minutes earlier the queen of power of this branch, now looking like a criminal awaiting her sentence. In the chilly morning light, her face drained of color, her eyes vacant, and her lips trembling as she strove to stifle the rising panic. Greg Harris and Jason Baker beside her fared no better. Greg clenched his fists so tightly his fingernails bit into his palms, his gaze darting as if seeking an impossible escape. Jason, who had been sneering moments before, now hung his head, shoulders hunched as though shrinking away from everyone's stare. Mike Turner and Eric Holmes, the two guards who had so forcefully handled Alicia, looked ashen, their backs slick with sweat. Amy Sanders could only sob, her broken apology echoing through the stillness. "I'm sorry. I really didn't know." Michael stood tall, his eyes sweeping the room, his voice firm and uncompromising. "Allow me to introduce you. This is Alicia Carter, Chief Executive Officer of Liberty Financial. The Board of Directors has been watching this entire incident live on our security cameras, and it's all recorded." His words crashed over the lobby like a thunderclap in clear skies, stripping away the last facade at the teller line. Shock and disbelief rippled through the crowd like a whirlwind. Sandra nearly staggered, her face going as pale as paper, her legs trembling as she stared at Alicia, the unassuming woman she had publicly humiliated and tried to expel from her own home. Greg shook visibly, his Adam's apple bobbing. Jason gasped for breath. Unable to meet anyone's eyes, beads of cold sweat forming on his brow. Mike and Eric froze, waiting for their next command, fear etched into every line of their faces. The customers, once silent observers, now erupted. Mutters turned into murmurs of outrage, some dropping jaws in disbelief, others scoffing bitterly at the exposed farce. A few patrons still filming broke into applause, the sound swelling across the room like a wave, joined by cheers blending admiration with righteous anger. "Bravo! Serves the power trip tyrants right! Absolutely brilliant. Should have happened ages ago." At the center of the storm, Alicia stood unbowed, shoulders squared, her gaze calm yet sharp with authority. There was no arrogance or bitter triumph, only the serene confidence of someone who had weathered every storm and was now reclaiming justice for herself and for all who had silently endured the same injustice. In the corner, Amy continued to wipe tears, murmuring apologies with pleading eyes. Sandra, now fully aware of her mistake, was rendered speechless. Her career, her reputation, her power, all evaporated in that moment before her staff, her customers, and the company's highest leadership. In that room, truth could no longer hide behind any mask. Everything lay exposed, and the power of justice, no matter how delayed, proved strong enough to overturn even the most seemingly invincible games of injustice and arrogance. The hush in the lobby still hummed with whispered shock after Alicia Carter's identity was revealed. But within seconds, that murmur fell away into a profound silence as Alicia stepped deliberately into the center of the room, the very stage of false power, now set for a raw confrontation between justice and the remnants of injustice. She stood tall, shoulders squared, her eyes bright with unshakable resolve. Her voice rang out clearly, each word carving itself into the air, not only as a warning, but as a bold declaration for all of Liberty Financial. "Sandra Wilson, Greg Harris, Jason Baker, you are hereby terminated effective immediately for gross violations of our policies, values, and anti-discrimination laws." Each name struck like a blade, severing every excuse and mask worn by those who had brazenly wielded power to trample others. Sandra Wilson froze, lips trembling, her last hope dissolving into despair in her eyes. Greg Harris went deathly pale, jaw clenched as though to stifle a cry. Jason Baker trembled, shoulders slumped, hands clasped in shame. Alicia didn't stop there. She turned to the remaining staff, her tone softer but still unwavering. "Amy Sanders, Mike Turner, Eric Holmes, you are suspended and will be investigated for your roles in this incident. Silence and inaction in the face of injustice are forms of complicity. Liberty Financial has no tolerance for such compromise." Amy burst into tears, a flood of sorrow and relief, knowing she'd reached the tipping point of remorse and awakening. Mike Turner and Eric Holmes bowed their heads in silent contrition. Alicia's firm yet compassionate stance was not meant as mere punishment, but to awaken the conscience of those who had thought themselves mere cogs in a broken machine. Meeting each of their eyes, she spoke without anger, but with measured disappointment and fierce hope. "Liberty Financial has no place for discrimination or injustice. From this day forward, every customer, regardless of race, background, appearance, or social standing, will be treated with equal respect. Our purpose is to serve with fairness and to build trust, not to instill fear." Her words planted a new power in the room, stirring even the most withdrawn observers. A few customers wiped tears away. Others whispered thanks. A second wave of applause broke out, this time for more than one woman's triumph, but for the unstoppable force of what is right. Watching from headquarters, Michael Reynolds and the board members felt that same stirring of hope. In that moment, the very values of Liberty Financial, once questioned, even eroded, were reborn right there in the bank's lobby, fueled by the courage of one unassuming black woman and the awakening of an entire community. The rise of justice, this time not in reports or empty proclamations, but in a public transformation witnessed by dozens, proved that even in the face of injustice, a single act of steadfast courage can draw the final line between light and darkness. The bank lobby fell into a profound, almost endless silence after Alicia Carter's powerful declaration. The murmurs and wary glances of the old guard vanished. In the great hall, everyone seemed to hold their breath, hanging on Alicia's every word and every measured breath. This woman, who had endured every wound and injustice to become a living symbol of courage and compassion. In that hush, something irreversible had shifted. Sandra Wilson, Greg Harris, and Jason Baker, the trio just publicly fired, stood motionless, their masks gone. Sandra bit her lip, tears spilling over in shame and belated awakening. Greg slumped against a chair, hollow-eyed, realizing that all the power he once flaunted was an illusion when confronted by truth. Jason trembled, staring at his shoes, finally feeling the weight of his so-called harmless taunts. Amy Sanders, Mike Turner, and Eric Holmes stood quietly, faces etched with regret, and, in their eyes, a glimmer of hope, that openly confronting their mistakes might be their first step toward redemption, this time with hearts that value justice and empathy. The customers in the lobby, once passive witnesses, now surged forward to shake Alicia's hand. Some wept as they spoke. Thank you for speaking up for so many of us. We're proud Liberty Financial has a CEO like you. This story will change banking across the country. Young patrons raised their phones to live stream Alicia, her simple navy t-shirt, her neatly braided hair, posting hashtags like Respect for All, No More Discrimination, Alicia Carter, Sure Change Begins Here. Within hours, the video of this extraordinary event at Liberty Financial had gone viral nationwide, dominating news outlets and financial forums. Experts, reporters, even social justice advocates praised Alicia's spirit, not just defending her own dignity, but sparking a new wave against discrimination and igniting a vision for a truly humane, fair banking culture. But above all was Alicia's message. Before leaving the lobby, she paused, meeting every gaze, from those who'd erred to those who had stood for what's right, from familiar clients to strangers she'd never met. Her voice was steady, heartfelt, yet resolute. No matter who you are, what you wear, or where you come from, you deserve respect and fair treatment. Never stay silent in the face of injustice. And in the midday light streaming through the windows, the image of Alicia Carter, a woman of humble dress but unyielding character, etched itself into the memory of everyone present. It wasn't just the end of a tumultuous day, but the beginning of a new era, one in which every individual understands the power of respect, justice, and the courage to stand up for what's right. That lesson will echo far beyond the walls of Liberty Financial, inspiring a generation to face injustice, to drive change, and to extend compassion, all regardless of who we are, where we come from, or what we've endured. If this story touched your heart, please hit like, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Let's spread the power of justice, courage, and respect for everyone. Thank you for watching.